The fourth argument I present for arguments against theism is what's called Paul Draper's cumulative case for naturalism. Draper's argument sets out to show that naturalism is far more probably true than Christianity/theism. Naturalism being the natural world is a closed system, so no non-natural things affects it. He aims to show this by taking a wide range of data and arguing that the data are more expected under naturalism than theism. Paul Draper considers 7 datum, starting with number 1, religious moral equivalence. We would expect a true religion to improve the moral lives of those that adhere to it. We would expect a true religion to have its believers morally superior to those of other false religions and other non-believers. However, those that believe in Christianity are not more virtuous than atheists, agnostics, or other believers in separate religions. This argument is only strengthened if Christians are less virtuous, by the way, but that is not the point of the argument. The argument only requires that there be roughly moral equivalence. Things like the Holocaust, Crusades, church history, etc., only make us more skeptical of the claim of a moral superiority that Christians exhibit over atheists, agnostics, or those who believe in other religions. So the Christian theist has the following horn. 1. Claim that atheists and the like are morally inferior. This is obviously false. Or 2. Claim that belief/adherence to their religion doesn't bear moral fruits. But of course, if their religion is true, this is really unexpected. But on naturalism, one would not expect theistic belief to bear significant moral fruits. Thus, this supports naturalism. Number 2. Theism and substance dualism. Substance dualism is the thesis that the mind or soul is a substance separate from the body, which is also a substance, these both being completely separate substances. Now, theism entails substance dualism. Therefore, evidence against substance dualism is evidence against theism. Now, here are some problems for substance dualism. It violates Occam's razor, as neuroscience has proven an invariable correlation between the mental and the physical. We can change literally anything about you by changing your brain, including some of your horrible ability to reason, your moral judgments, your character, your personality. There was a case I read about where a child had a compulsion to kill. I think he may have even attacked a fellow classmate with a baseball bat. They found a tumor in his brain, got rid of it, the compulsion went away immediately. There are many cases like that. This is not rare. We can literally make you the listener, want to kill others. You may even act on that desire just by changing your brain. But your ability to reason, your moral judgments, your character, your personality, these things are usually taken by the theist to reside in your soul. Why then would merely changing the body result in, seemingly, according to the theist, altering aspects contained within the soul? Thus, souls multiply entities unnecessarily and could create other problems like 1. The interaction problem, 2. The systemic overdetermination problem, 3. The violation of causal closure, 4. Making false predictions. On substance dualism, we would expect evidence of the parapsychological and the paranormal. There isn't evidence of this, therefore substance dualism makes a false prediction. If a theist wants to avoid these problems, or is otherwise a physicalist about all minds besides God's, well, physicalism is a lot more expected on naturalism than theism, so this view is evidence for naturalism over theism. Number 3, evolution. Evolution is true, and on naturalism, evolution is plausibly the only way for humans to exist. On theism, there are many other ways humans can come to exist. Thus, evolution is more expected on naturalism than on theism. I would also like to add that not only is evolution more expected on naturalism than theism, because on naturalism that's the only option, whereas the theist God has other options, but an additional reason to suspect this is that evolution is inherently cruel and is thus more reason to expect it on naturalism and not theism. Also, if theism is true, then probably minds are not physical. And if substance dualism is true, then minds are fundamentally different from non-conscious life. If minds are fundamentally different from non-conscious life, then probably minds were created independent of non-conscious life. If minds were created independent of non-conscious life, then probably not evolution. Therefore, evolution entails probably not theism. Evolution, therefore, probably not theism. Fourth piece of data, distribution of pain/pleasure. Pain and pleasure are systematically correlated with evolutionary goals, like survival and reproduction, not morality and goodness. Pain is correlated with that which threatens survival and reproduction. Pleasure is correlated with aiding survival and reproduction. Counterexamples are also easily explained as byproducts of these things. This applies to all suffering and pleasure, not just with humans, but animals as well. This is relevant because if naturalism, then pain and pleasure not correlated with morality is not surprising. Theism, however, implies that pain and pleasure are distributed by God for justifiable reasons, and it's quite surprising then that those reasons happen to align with evolutionary success. Therefore, the distribution of pain and pleasure is evidence for naturalism over theism because the distribution follows what we would expect on naturalism and is surprising, in other words, what we would not expect on theism. Number 5, tragedies. There are gratuitous evils. This is when the good to come from a bad is negligible or non-existent. Now, gratuitous evil is so much more expected on naturalism than theism. One could say, there are no gratuitous evil. How do we know that there aren't potential outweighing goods to come from a seeming gratuitous evil? But this uncertainty cuts both ways, for we could similarly ask, how do we know that a seeming gratuitous evil doesn't actually lead to even more bads? So the appeal to the unknown doesn't help explain the appearance of gratuitous evil. Thus, the appearance of gratuitous evil is evidence for naturalism. Number 6. Silence during gratuitous evil. Even if we can't grasp the reason God has to allow for suffering, that doesn't affect the fact that he can still comfort us when we experience suffering. The same way a baby may not understand why, say, it's getting a shot at the doctor, the parent could still comfort the baby nonetheless. Therefore, the fact that people do not feel God comforting them during suffering is unexpected and is thus evidence of naturalism. Finally, number 7, religious confusion. There is so much disagreement about which religion is true, and within each religion, much debate about which tenet is true, and much debate about the reward/punishment for those who believe the wrong thing, such as hell or heaven. Now, all of this is surprising on theism and not naturalism. As God is omniscient, he can clear up all of this, and given his omnibenevolence, he should want to. Not just so that we stop fighting, and not just so that we avoid punishment, but also, seemingly, because he would want a relationship with us. This is all the more striking given that there are earnest people seeking to find the true religion. However, on naturalism, a world indifferent to our beliefs is what we'd expect, and it's seemingly what we get. So, in conclusion, the 7 pieces of data, religious moral equivalence, theism and substance dualism, evolution, distribution of pain pleasure, tragedies, silence during gratuitous evil, religious confusion, all of these seem to favor naturalism over theism. This amounts to a pretty strong accumulative case for naturalism.